I wanted to have a night at the club without my husband. I ignored his warning. Then this happened. How far of your sanity do you have to be to cheat on your perfect supporting husband on a nasty club night? After he even warned you about it? I wouldn't know how to answer that question, but I got myself in this exact situation. It's one of those mistakes you fall asleep hoping you could go back in time to fix it, or at least wake up and realize it was all a bad dream. Unfortunately, it's in fact a living nightmare, which I could have avoided. My name is Natalie. I'm 27 years old, and I'm married to Michael. He's 29, and we've been together for 5 years, married for 3 of them. He is quite literally the best thing that ever happened to me. Without Michael, I probably wouldn't be alive. I don't say that as if I was an incomplete woman without a man, or like I needed to get married to finally thrive. It is only because if he hadn't showed up in my life, I probably would have ruined my life with my habits and way of living. He helped in my worst moments and stuck around in my life when I thought no one else would. I am the oldest kid of a family of 5. My parents had enough money to keep our family going, but many things were still out of our reach. When I went to college, I was on my own. My parents could never afford the tuition fees or even my expenses living in another city. I took a student loan and moved states to be able to study. When I got to Chicago, where I went to college and still live to this day, I started getting random jobs to support myself. My first years were great. Everything was new and different, even while I was exhausted trying to juggle work and college. I still had a lot of fun and was happy knowing I was fulfilling one of my dreams. When I turned 21, my roommate said I could get a job at clubs close to our school. I'd have to work during the nights, but at least the pay was good, and I just had to be pretty to get tips. At first, I considered it a good idea. My classes only started later in the morning, so I could sleep after work and go to class rested. Constant loud music and drunk people stop being fun when you start working with it. Another thing about working in a club is that you'll probably be harassed at least 3 times a night, not only by costumers, but also by people who work with you, in my case, my boss. Work started being my personal hell, but I had to keep myself there. What I was getting from those tips were saving me from big financial trouble. I had never tried drugs until I started working there. I felt horrible in that environment, and I wanted something to make me forget about how much I hated it. I worked at a club and lived around college students. It was easier getting drugs than anything else. I didn't think it would be a big deal. I thought everyone exaggerated talking about drugs. And just because other people got addicted, it wouldn't mean I'd get too. I don't even have to say how easily that was proven wrong to me. The worse I felt, the more I'd take. I only worked high. It made things more tolerable and easier. I kept functioning in college. Not even having a crazy different amount of substances in my body made me forget that getting good grades was my only way out of that life. I met Michael during my last year. It was quite funny, actually. I needed to study for a test after I left my shift at the club. I was trying to study in the campus library, but failing hard. I was with the worst hangover ever. The words I tried to read mixed around, and nothing made sense. I accidentally fell asleep on the desk and only woke up with a tap on my shoulder. When I looked up confused, Michael was there.
No.
He said I slept like that for 3 hours and wanted to see if I was okay. I got up immediately, swearing a little bit for thinking I was late to my test. When I picked up my phone and saw the time, I sighed in relief, seeing that I still had half an hour to be in class. Michael laughed and said it happened to him all the time. He asked if he could buy me a cup of coffee before I got to my test, and I said yes. We got our coffee to go and sat on the stair of the building which I was doing my test in. We talked about so many different things in those few minutes. I explained to him why I looked terrible and unconscious on the library. About my job, of course, not the drugs. We talked about our degrees, friends, families, and personal interests like we were old friends. He was sweet and guessed correctly what I wanted to order. When it was my time to leave, he said he really wanted to see me again and asked me out for dinner. Since that day, we hung out together almost every day of the rest of my senior year. It didn't take much for me to fall in love with Michael. He was even more than I could have wished for. After we dated for 2 months, I told Michael about hating my job and what I did to forget about that. He asked if someday he could see me at the club, so I told him I didn't want him to because most, or all of the times I was there, I was high on hard substances and I never wanted him to see me like that. He had already noticed how physically and mentally exhausted I usually was. He realized sometimes it was a huge effort for me to keep my life going. During that summer, a few months after we started dating, I officially hit rock bottom. I picked up extra shifts at the club, and when I wasn't working, I just blacked out in my bed, for an unhealthy and exaggerated amount of hours. I always texted Michael before, during, and after work for him to be sure I was fine and not unconscious in a bathroom, something which happened more often than what I used to tell him. One day, I left my shift and forgot to text him. I got home and immediately threw myself in bed. I remember mixing medications together and going to sleep. That day, I slept for 24 hours. I had the next day off, so at least I didn't have to handle my crazy boss. Except there was someone unaware of my location and well-being, Michael. I woke up to the very loud noise of my apartment door. He broke in looking for me. The girl I shared my apartment with was back home, since we didn't have any classes, but I stayed so I could gather money and not have to work that much during classes. Therefore, I was completely alone in my apartment, and Michael didn't have a key. I dragged myself out of the room to see what was going on and found him breathing intensely. When he saw me, it was like he was having a heart attack. He said he was worried sick about me because I didn't text him. He looked for me at work, went to my apartment, knocked and ringed the bell repeatedly, so he assumed I wasn't there. After he looked for me everywhere, he decided to force himself in. He seemed angry, but he was mostly worried. We had a conversation I'll never forget. Being sober definitely helped, but he said something that was my turning point. "That's it, Nath. This is over. You're calling that prick of your boss and telling him you quit. For God's sake, you're in your senior year. It can't be hard finding a decent job. I'll take care of that for you. You should worry about getting clean, like actually clean. I mean it." I told Michael I didn't want this to be his responsibility. From the moment I told him about my addiction, I warned him that I didn't want to dump my problems on him, especially this specific problem. I liked him a lot, but I couldn't ruin his life like this. I don't care about that, Nath. I'm not feeling what you're feeling. I have no idea how it feels, so I got the easy part. As long as you promise me to get clean, I'll stay here. I'm falling in love with you, and I seriously can't handle feeling what I felt today. I thought you OD'd and was dead somewhere. I can't handle this. I want to make sure you're safe and sound, and I'll do everything I can to make this happen. He cried a little bit. That was the moment I started having a reason to be better. He saved me, and I could never forget that day. The abstinence crisis were the worst part. I even had to go to the hospital. The plan was trying to quit on my own, while telling Michael to do everything to stop me from leaving the house unsupervised. If that didn't work and I relapsed, rehab would be the only option. Gladly, I was able to pass the 2 weeks of pain, then it got a little easier to be sober, and leaving my job actually helped. For months, the only thing I had on my mind was drugs. I felt horrible for still wanting them, but learned it's part of the process. I started going to NA meetings. There, I found the support I needed. It felt good to have something helping other than Michael, because again, I didn't want to dump my addict problems on him. By the end of summer, I found a paid internship and was sober for 2 months. When I completed my 2 years sober, Michael said he wanted to take on a trip so we could celebrate. After getting clean, I started having a thing for nature. Hiking, camping, and being in the woods cleared my mind and made me feel sane. Whenever I felt triggered, Michael and I would camp and watch the stars at the top of some mountain, but only in the summer because I don't love nature that much to be in it when it's cold. This time, Michael rented a beautiful country house for us. It turned out to be a romantic getaway. He proposed to me while we were having s'mores on a fire outside. I don't think I'd ever felt this happy. The only day I was happier than that was at our wedding. I could have never imagined a life like that when I was in college. He changed me completely, and I had never felt better. During our years together, I could always count on Michael, and he could always count on me. He was my safety net during our first years together, and I wanted to be his when he needed me to. Becoming a stable person and being able to offer emotional support to my husband was always very important to me. Our life together was incredible. We built something out of this world together. After I started working on what I actually liked, things got 100 times better. I was able to grow professionally and finally be comfortable with money. I had a stable life and someone who loved me, all I could ever wish for. I had never relapsed since the day Michael asked me to quit. Things keep on being hard, but after 5 years, it got easier. When we went to our friends' birthdays, Michael was always with me. Being around alcohol is always a trigger, but with him by my side, I knew I wasn't going to relapse. I always felt bad not being able to go to social events because of addiction triggers. Every time someone from work invited me, I had to say I couldn't, and not exactly explain why. I wished I was able to put my past where it should be, behind me, without affecting who I am today. I never actually found out if it would be hard for me to be around people drinking or whatever else, because I was always with Michael by my side. I was in my 20s, and not being able to celebrate important things with my friends and colleagues. I always knew being an addict is kind of a disease for life, but couldn't I be better? Wasn't it something I could heal? I spent 5 years without even getting near drugs and alcohol. Could there be an expiration date? I asked myself so many unanswered questions, and all I wished was to be normal. This matter came back to my attention recently. 2 of our best friends were getting married, and the big day was finally coming, but first we had their bachelorette parties. I was their bridesmaid and helped my friend organize her wedding from beginning to end. I was very excited to celebrate it with her. We only talked about it for weeks. Karen, the bride, decided her bachelorette party would be at a famous bar here in Chicago. Our friends always talked about it, but again, it wasn't the kind of place Michael and I were used to going. It would be just like the classics. Boys in one bar together and girls in another bar. In the end, the 2 parties would become one. The boys' bachelorette party was going to happen in a bar next to the girls', so it would be okay for me. Michael would be 1 step away, in case I had any triggers. I was super excited to go. We met this couple of friends when they weren't even together, so we saw them grow their love from just dating without anything serious to helping them organize their wedding. I wasn't anxious about the party. I knew I could control myself, but if I didn't, I just had to call Michael and everything would be fine. A few days before the bachelorette party, Michael came home from work with a sad expression on his face. He told he'd have to be out of town for 2 days. They wanted him in an important meeting across the country. He'd be able to be back in time for the wedding, but it was impossible for him to come to the bachelorette party. He had already talked to our soon-to-be married friends about it and promised he would see them getting married. We spent hours discussing the party, if I should or shouldn't go. I told Michael I didn't want to miss out on important events in our life because of my addiction. I could be with my friends while not drinking or blacking out because of drugs. I controlled myself for 5 years. I could handle one night without Michael. He was hesitant and worried about it. Michael asked me repeatedly if I was sure I could do this alone. Everyone around me would be really drunk and I'd have to deal with them being sober. There was a big chance of bad things happening. Alcohol was never my problem, but when I joined NA, I also stopped drinking. Because we fight addiction to all drugs, so no one drinks or does any other drugs of any kind. It was easier to be around people drinking than doing other things. I trusted myself enough to do this alone, and I hope Michael also did. But his reaction to it wasn't the best. We talked about it for a few days, and his final opinion was basically, I don't think this is a good idea. You'll be going to a bar by yourself, and it's a place filled with bad decisions just waiting for you to make them. You can lose all your 5-year progress in one night. And for what? I understood his point of view, but either way, I felt like I had something to prove to myself. Prove that I wasn't the same inconsequential addict from college. Michael was clearly frustrated and worried, but he understood it could be part of my healing process. He accepted it and said for me to call him every now and then during the party. If I felt like drinking anything, I should call or text him immediately. We made a deal and I hoped everything would go as I planned. Spoiler, it didn't. At Karen's bachelorette party, everything was going fine for the first 2 hours. We celebrated just like I idealized for months. I was texting Michael every now and then and things were great. At one specific moment, Karen started a speech thanking everyone for coming. She wanted to do a shot of tequila with all of her friends to celebrate. No. Karen was filling shot glasses with the bottle of tequila the bar gifted her. She handed one of them to me and I immediately said I couldn't. Come on, Nath. You're not even an alcoholic. I'm not offering you smack. Just this one for me, for us to celebrate. What do you think? I felt bad saying no, so I accepted and took the tequila shot. It was too strong for me. I spent so much time without drinking it felt like I was hit in the head. I wasn't drunk after the shot, obviously, but I feel like after that moment things turned into a blank. Nothing stopped me from accepting a beer from someone after that, and another, and another. At the party, I met many friends of Karen. They were all very different from each other, especially this girl who was talking to me since the beginning of the party. It was already pretty late, and I drank a lot when I went to the bathroom with this girl. After we used the toilet, I was just checking my hair in the mirror, and she took out of her pocket a little plastic bag with a white powder on it. She used it in front of me and offered it. That moment, I knew Michael was right. As much as I knew how much what she was holding ruined my life, I couldn't stop thinking about the euphoric effects I missed feeling. My memories go until this moment, I only know that I accepted everything that girl offered me from that moment on. At the moment, I couldn't feel the seriousness of what I was doing. So much to the point I met a random guy at the club and threw myself at him. We hooked up in the middle of the dance floor, the bathroom, and the outside of the bar. How do I know that? Well, Karen and the other girl I met told me what happened, and also because I woke up in his room, naked, next to him. When I woke up, a few memories came to my mind. I looked around the guy's room and saw everything was thrown on the ground, and the skirt I wore the day before was ripped, so it was pretty intense. I saw a rest of pills and other substances scattered in the guy's bedside table, seeing that it was like being shot in my stomach. I had some flashbacks of doing what we did in his room. The more they came to my mind, the more I wanted to throw up. I freaked out and pretty much ran away from his house. I couldn't stop crying when I got home. Looking in the mirror, I could see bruises marks all over my body. I was a 27-year-old married woman with hickeys all over me. What a disgrace had I done? Michael was getting home in the afternoon and I would have to tell him. Just thinking about it made me want to run away, but I couldn't be more of a coward than I already was. Speaking of Michael, during the night I repeatedly texted Michael saying everything was fine. I told him I was going home, and in reality, I spent 2 more hours at the club and even went to someone else's house. That's what we addicts do. We lie, all because of things we are basically slaves to. Even after 5 years, I was still a slave to the drugs which ruined my life. When I heard our apartment's door being unlocked, I already started crying. Michael showed up with the biggest smile on his face while I looked wrecked. I was sitting at the couch. When he noticed my tears, he ran straight to me with a worried look on his face. When he asked me what happened, I didn't even have the guts to hold it in. I screwed up, Michael, like really hard. I said in the middle of tears, and his expression changed immediately. He knew what I was talking about. I explained everything to him, from the first tequila shot to the trash scattered around the random guy's room. He listened carefully to me, and when I finished, the tears in his eyes were impossible to not notice. He got up and went as far away from me as possible, still in our living room. What he said next is still running through my head. How could you have done this to me, Natalie? I told you so many times this could happen. You get out of yourself, you know that. I told you it wasn't a good idea. What the hell, Nat? You throw away 5 years of marriage and sobriety for a bunch of drugs, tequila, and a random man whore? What the hell is wrong with you? The more he talked, the more I cried. He looked over at the shelves we had in your living room, went over to them, and picked up all of my sobriety chips from NA. If this is bullshit to you, fine. I never knew these things were more important to me than to you. Without hesitation, he threw my chips out the window. I was completely shocked. Why are you looking at me like that? You're not going to need them anymore. How long have you been sober? Oh yes, like 3 hours or something? I hope you're proud. You ruined your life, my life, and our marriage. For God's sake, when we met you were doing meth. I bet everything I had on you. I loved you with all of my being and did everything for you. You're still nothing but a meth head, and I can't feel anything but disgust finding out about this. You make me nauseous, Natalie. I had never seen him so angry. He yelled at me in a way I had never witnessed before. He was right. He was absolutely right. He still had a lot to say and went on. The worst part is not even the lack of respect for our relationship. You slept with a random dude, pretty screwed up. But you literally have no self-respect. You did drugs and slept with strangers. How can I expect you to respect me and our relationship if you throw away 5 damn years of your own sobriety for blacking out at a stranger's house? God, you are gross. Get out of here. He pointed at the door and seemed serious. He watched me while I put most of my clothes in any bags I could find. He didn't take his eyes off me until I was in front of our door ready to leave. I wasn't able to say anything. I only cried and sobbed. He was literally right yelling, "I told you so," to my face, because he actually did tell me this could happen. He knew me better than I knew myself, and I didn't know how exactly I was supposed to live without him. That day was the last day I saw Michael. Update. Hello guys. I left things sort of unfinished in my last post. I was a little loopy and upset writing it. Now I come here to give you an update on my situation and answer some of your questions. As you know, I'm an addict who relapsed in a bachelorette party, blacked out, and cheated on Michael, my husband. Well, now ex. After Michael kicked me out of our apartment, I returned to my hometown. I explained everything that happened to my parents, and they agreed with me on going to rehab. I spent 30 days there and left 2 days ago. I'm with my parents and plan on going back to work soon. That involves going back to Chicago, which I'm still considering if it's a good or bad idea. Michael sent me our divorce papers before I got into rehab. I signed and sent it back to him, and I guess that's how our story ended. I haven't heard from him since, and he definitely doesn't want to hear from me. I have no explanation for what I did. I screwed up and genuinely didn't think it would be that easy for me to relapse. My NA sponsor told me that addicts are always addicts. No matter how long we stay sober, there's still some sort of instability which will influence us to relapse again. I always heard that during meetings, but for some reason I thought I was different. Michael trusted me and helped me recover from the worst moment of my life. I betrayed his trust, our marriage, and lost the greatest person I ever met. I know I'll never find someone like him. For all that I put him through, I'm sure karma will never let me be loved again. Remember to always listen to your spouses. Sometimes they know better about you than yourself.